Night descended over Texas like thick velvet studded with shimmering stars. Along the long, deserted highway, where time seemed to slow its course, Nova Rice drove alone in her matte black coupe of an old pickup truck. The neon lights of a lone gas station, situated on the roadside, cast ominous reflections on the wet asphalt, creating fanciful patterns as if inviting forthcoming events. Nova was a woman whose eyes reflected a determination tempered by years of service in the Marine Corps. Her face, illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard, did not show the slightest trace of fatigue, only a cold-blooded calm and confidence acquired in battles where every second could be the last. She had just spent a few days with a retired Marine, her father in the suburbs of Dallas, and was now returning to the life she had chosen for herself, a life in which discipline and danger were an integral part of existence. While Nova's vehicle glided along the deserted road, her inner monologue brought her back to those sleepless nights of training, to moments when body and mind merged into one, allowing her to feel every inch of the surrounding world. She analyzed the smallest details, the rustle of the wind, echoes of old battles, the quiet sounds of nature. All of it became a signal for her, a warning that even in the seeming silence of the night, danger lurks. Not having had time to slip into her reflections, Nova noticed a strange movement at the entrance to the gas station. Her gaze froze instantly, as if she involuntarily focused on something others could not see. Angular silhouettes exhaling a sinister light under the flickering neon lamps, lined up at an old SUV. Four figures, whose uncertain movements and slow gait betrayed excessive smugness, got out of the car as if predetermined to embody wild aggression. One of them, a tall, skinny man in a battered leather jacket with a sneering grin, was clearly savoring the moment. His eyes gleamed with a cold mockery as he whistled softly, approaching Nova's car. The others, laughing, formed a semicircle around the gas pump, as if preparing for some pre-planned performance. At that moment, Nova felt her heart beat a little faster, but she did not allow herself to panic. Her thoughts darted between cold detachment and the inner pulse of memories about those who once tried to break her. Her gaze remained calm, her eyes focused, despite the mounting tension. She slowly moved her hand toward the steering wheel, as if searching for confidence in her own skill, which had been honed by years of rigorous training. Words barely audible came from the lips of the man in the leather jacket. "Well, well, what do we have here?" His voice, filled with mockery, sounded as though he had just found new entertainment for a boring night. The others laughed. Their voices merged into a single booming echo, creating an atmosphere of haughty irresponsibility. Nova did not show any emotion. Her tone was even and cold like steel. She quietly, almost uncertainly, but with determination, pronounced, "I'm just passing through." Her words, spoken with such imperturbable confidence, slightly diffused the atmosphere, but simultaneously sowed the seed of impending trouble. The man in the leather jacket exchanged a glance with his companions. His smile turned into an icy expression that indicated their careless anticipation was about to turn into disastrous consequences. In the second when the tension reached its peak, Nova realized that these people were not just looking for easy prey. They craved a reaction, a confirmation of their illusion of power. Her inner voice, sharpened by years of struggle, reminded her, "You are not who they think you are. You are Nova Rice, and this evening will not end as they expect." The night seemed silent, but every sound, from the rustle of the wind to the quiet hum of the running pump, became a symbol of the upcoming clash. Nova raised her head, carefully studying the figures of her opponents, and a spark of resolve glowed in her eyes. She knew that this moment was the first blow of fate, which would determine the further course of her path. And at that same instant, time seemed to freeze, preparing to erupt into a storm in which no mistake would be forgiven. As soon as the shadow cast by the neon lights of the gas station dissolved again into the darkness of the night, Nova felt the tension in the air thicken, as if the night itself was about to reveal its secrets. Four figures, not yet fully aware that their anticipation had brought them only fleeting satisfaction, approached her car, forming a semicircle with a casual self-assurance that would soon turn into a fatal error. Nova sat behind the wheel, as if in deep meditation, but her mind was working at full capacity. Memories of training, endless repetitions of strikes and counterstrikes, flashed before her eyes, reminding her that she was not just a woman who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had been created for battle. Her inner voice quietly but inexorably repeated, "You know who you are, Nova. You won't let yourself down today." One of the hooligans, tall and thin, came up first. His steps were unhurried but laden with intention, which was expressed in his every movement. He stopped at the open window, and his voice, cool and mocking, pierced the night's silence. "What do you say, sweetheart? Think you're too busy to give us a minute of your attention?" The words sounded like a sneer, but Nova did not hurry to answer. Instead, she raised her eyes, and they reflected a determination tempered by years of discipline and personal trials. Her every movement, every breath, was precise, like part of a pre-rehearsed survival ballet. She knew that these people considered her easy prey, weak and incapable of standing up for herself. That was exactly what would let them down. "I'm just passing through," she said coldly and evenly, as if it were a simple statement of fact rather than a warning. Her voice was quiet, but it carried firmness and steadfastness. At that moment, when the laughter of the hooligans echoed around the gas station, Nova felt her nervous system switch into combat-ready mode. Every muscle was tense, like a string ready for an instant discharge of energy. Among those gathered, the man in the tattered leather jacket exchanged a look with his companions. His eyes narrowed and his lips curved into a barely noticeable smirk. The smirk of someone used to his aggression, not always yielding the desired results. But this time, as Nova held their attention with her calmness, his confidence wavered. Inwardly, Nova analyzed every detail: the position of the opponent's feet, slight turns of their heads, uncertain breaths that revealed hidden insecurity. She knew that anyone's mistake could be the start of her counterattack. In her mind, images from training halls flashed, movements honed to automatic precision. She was ready to use them against those who considered her weak. The man in the leather jacket took a step forward, his hand slowly rising to the hood of the car, as if about to extend it to invite her closer. But Nova did not retreat. Inside her flared a sense of contempt for such failed attempts at self-assertion. Her mind instantly calculated all possible options, and she had already chosen her first move: to defend herself and punish every incorrect assessment. A moment of silence lasted too long. Every movement, every glance seemed suspended in the air, promising an inevitable collision. Nova clenched her fist, feeling adrenaline spread under her skin, and everything around turned into a dynamic kaleidoscope of sensations. At that moment, she realized that these people were not just trying to provoke a reaction from her. They were mistaken, believing her to be an easy target, erroneously thinking that her outward composure signaled weakness. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she whispered under her breath, and in her voice there was a warning addressed to no one but those who thought they could take advantage of her silence. The laughter and taunts around seemed to her only a backdrop for the upcoming spectacle, where every minute could be decisive. At that instant, when space and time merged in anticipation of the inevitable clash, Nova already knew her composure and strength, honed over the years, would turn this easy target into a fatal mistake for those who dared to challenge her. When the roar of the gas station's engine died down, Nova, still with a racing pulse, accelerated her pickup and left the gas station behind, leaving only flickering lights and the echo of dissatisfied laughter in her wake. In the silence of the night highway, she already felt how mounting tension was replaced by a troubling premonition. Her pursuers were not about to stay put. In the rearview mirror, faint lights were already flashing, silhouettes of cars ready to burst into her life again to impose another conflict. As soon as Nova drove onto the highway, everything around seemed to transform. The road seemed to come alive, becoming an arena for a dynamic chase. Behind her, in the darkness, the silhouettes of cars flickered. One of them stood out with aggressive headlights, almost mockingly glowing in response to her rapid departure. The music in Nova's cabin, previously subdued by calm, now seemed like an inexorable rhythm, emphasizing the drama of the situation. Each moment felt precisely calculated: sharp acceleration, brief slowdowns, instantaneous turns. Everything in this chase was thought out to the smallest detail, as if fate itself had decided to play its own game. Inside Nova raged an ocean of thoughts and memories. Flashes of training, nights in army barracks, countless hours of honing combat skills. All this resurfaced in her consciousness with startling clarity. She felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins, every heartbeat prompting, now or never. This inner resolve, refined by years of service, helped her not only cope with the physical pressure, but also maintain composure in the most tense moments. Every slightest movement of the enemy, reflected in the rearview mirror, became a signal for her to act. She analyzed speed, trajectory, and distance, predicting when and where her next chance to strike back would be. The road, shrouded in the nighttime gloom, turned into a true battlefield for Nova. At every turn, in every reflection on the wet asphalt, she saw not only the pursuer's lights but also her own resolve. The harsh sounds of the engine, the rustle of tires on the wet surface, the rumble of passing cars, all of it created an incredibly tense atmosphere. Nova felt each second slow down and simultaneously speed up, turning into a game on the edge of life and death. Every instant of this chase was filled with drama, as if nature itself was trying to convey the full weight of the impending clash. In each curve of the road, Nova sought the opportunity to outsmart her pursuers. Her gaze, cold and calculating, fixed on the smallest details, glimmers of headlights, slight shifts of moving shadows, even insignificant noises in the cabin of her pickup. She constructed a tactical plan, analyzing every movement of the enemy. In her head, scenarios were already forming, from a sharp U-turn to using local shelters hidden along the highway. Her mind worked like a computer in which every decision was thought out to the smallest detail, allowing her not only to keep her distance, but also to anticipate the enemy's moves. While Nova continued her journey along the night highway, the echo of pursuit penetrated not only her external surroundings, but also the depths of her soul. Memories of past battles, fears, and hopes mixed, creating a complex mosaic of emotions. Each time one of the pursuers flashed in the mirror, she felt not just a physical threat, but a challenge to her inner strength and resilience. This chase became for her not just a struggle with an external enemy. It was a test, a check of how deeply her confidence and self-discipline were rooted. At the moment when the highway seemed endless and the pursuer's lights, relentless, Nova understood. Her path was only beginning, and every decision she made could be decisive. In her eyes was read not only determination, but also a profound inner struggle in which confronting external enemies intertwined with battling herself. And this night promised to be only the first chapter in a long and dangerous game, where each second was a step toward an inevitable clash for her own future. Night still enveloped the boundless Texas highways when Nova slowed her pickup on a deserted shoulder, trying to pull herself together after the exhausting chase. Inside the cabin reigned an anxious silence, broken only by the quiet hum of the running engine and her own steady breathing. At that moment, the past began to press insistently on her consciousness. Images of lost comrades, moments of harsh training and failures that left scars not only on her body, but also on her soul. It was at these moments that the past seemed to come alive again, reminding her that every confrontation leaves a mark. Suddenly, the phone rang, slicing through the tense silence. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to Marcus, her former commander, the person Nova trusted most. She immediately felt a wave of cold adrenaline run through her body. Marcus, with his even and calm voice, began a conversation that immediately gave the situation new, frighteningly significant shades. "Nova, it's Marcus," he began, wasting no time. "What happened at the gas station?" His voice dropped a little, almost to a whisper. It wasn't just a random attack, it was a signal. Listening to every word, Nova felt her inner world split into two parts. On one side, a cold-blooded resolve, honed by years of combat experience, and on the other, a growing anxiety, a premonition that behind this incident lurked something far more sinister. Memories of merciless training and nights in the barracks, when every movement mattered, once again filled her thoughts. Her heart was beating fast, but her mind remained focused. She had long understood that danger was not only hidden in the form of random street thugs. This was only the tip of the iceberg. Marcus continued, his voice sounding confident, though one could detect a certain sadness in it. These people, Nova, were just a pretext. Behind this stand much more powerful players connected to a criminal organization whose influence extends far beyond our city. We're talking about people who operate in the shadows, manipulating events in ways you can't even imagine. I'm afraid that now you've ended up in the center of the game, where the stakes are higher than ever. These words awakened in her a profound sense of inevitability. Images of merciless schemes, intrigues, and betrayal flashed through her mind. Nova realized that her path now intersected with dangerous and powerful forces, capable of destroying lives in an instant. But at the same time, a fire of determination lit up in her eyes. She was not going to back down. The conversation with Marcus became a turning point for Nova. Sitting in the silence of her pickup, she began to carefully calculate every possible scenario. Fragments of tactical constructions sounded in her mind. How to use each bend of the road, which hiding places to find in order to regroup and prepare for the upcoming confrontation. She mentally worked through a plan where every detail mattered. Her gaze slid over the dashboard, then turned to the nocturnal darkness outside the window, as if trying to see in it invisible gates leading to the truth. Nova understood that this night was only the beginning of a long and dangerous game, and every minute could be decisive. At that moment, she firmly decided, if someone was trying to corner her, she would be ready to respond, for she had not only years of training behind her, but also an unbreakable will. Marcus ended the conversation, leaving Nova with a feeling of deep understanding and horror, but also with a new source of strength. The voice of her former commander, filled with concern and warning, reminded her that even in the darkest moments, she was not alone. This information opened her eyes to the scale of the threat, and now her mission became much more complicated. Not just to survive, but to uncover the entire network of intrigues, where every secret leads to an even more dangerous mystery. Night once again enveloped Nova's pickup, and resolve gleamed in her eyes. She knew that new battles lay ahead of her, and she was ready to face them no matter what. Every second, every sound outside the window, everything now became part of her path to the truth, to liberation from the shadows of the past, forever left behind. The sky over Los Angeles was shrouded in a thick haze when Nova drove up to the Sapphire Club, a place where luxury was intertwined with the shadow of danger. After all the night chases and endless thoughts about the upcoming clash, she chose this moment for the decisive step. In a black form-fitting outfit, with a leather jacket and a short hairstyle, Nova looked like the embodiment of strength and confidence. She took a deep breath, feeling adrenaline pulsing in her blood, and headed for the entrance, where bright neon signs promised both intrigue and danger. Approaching the massive doors, Nova felt each step echo in her consciousness. The club's interior amazed with its contrast. Crystal chandeliers and gleaming tables sparkled here, and around every corner lurked guards with icy stares, ready to filter out unwelcome guests. The atmosphere was both glamorous and tense. Like every visitor knew that behind the outward luxury lay a world of intrigues and merciless calculations. Nova quickly ordered herself to remain inconspicuous, yet her every glance scanned the space in search of possible threats. In the depths of the hall, muffled rhythms of jazz and blues played, giving the impression that even the music here was part of a carefully orchestrated spectacle. As soon as Nova crossed the threshold of the club, her gaze met the cold assessment in the eyes of a man sitting in the corner of the VIP area. This was Rocco, the man everyone whispered about, from young to old, and whose name evoked both fear and admiration. He sat in a massive leather armchair, like a king on his throne. His face was paved with shadows, and his eyes glimmered with an unspoken threat. Rocco slowly raised his gaze, and an invisible connection instantly formed between them. As if in that look was inscribed everything they both knew about the rules of the game in a world where money, power, and violence went hand in hand. Nova. His voice was deep, steady, and filled with hidden mockery. I expected you to come. This phrase, spoken with absolute certainty, made her heart beat faster, but at the same time spurred on the resolve she had so carefully accumulated over the years. Rocco's gaze was cold as steel, but his smirk betrayed the knowledge that the game was just beginning. Moments seemed stretched to the limit. Nova slowly approached the table where Rocco awaited her, and silence filled with the anticipation of an inevitable clash hung between them. Their every gesture, every subtle movement seemed meticulously calculated. In the hall, filled with the sounds of hushed conversations and music, their encounter became the center of attention, like two opposites attracting each other, despite all apparent differences in the world. "You think you can change the rules of the game?" Rocco said, his voice sounding like a threat. "But remember, no one comes out a winner here if they don't know how to pay the price." Nova, not responding with words, straightened up, and her cold, focused gaze became a clear message. She had come to change the rules. At that same instant, the guards around activated, unobtrusively but obviously ready to intervene if something got out of control. Flashes of memories of training and battles, of sleepless nights and harsh lessons of the past, filled her mind. Every muscle, every nerve responded to this challenge. Nova knew that every moment of this encounter was decisive. Every word could mark the start of a new stage in her fight against the shadows hiding behind wealth and power. Rocco's words faded, giving way to a quiet sound as Nova abruptly made the first move. Her movements were extremely precise and calculated. First a smooth, almost graceful approach, then a lightning-fast strike that took not only the guards, but also Rocco himself by surprise. Explosions of emotion were replaced by instantaneous cold-bloodedness. Nova blocked every attempt at a counterattack, using each weakness of the opponent against him. A short, sharp crash of collision resounded in the hall, a sound that seemed to forever change the balance of power in this tangled world of intrigues. Every strike, every counterattack was calibrated to the smallest detail. Nova felt adrenaline seize every cell of her body, but her mind remained focused, analyzing every movement, anticipating every step of the enemy. Rocco, though he was the king of that night, began to lose confidence. His mask of unshakable strength started to crack under the onslaught of a real opponent who feared neither pain nor risk. After the fierce clash, the club was enveloped in an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant echoes of sirens and the faint flickering of neon lights outside the windows. Nova stood in the middle of the VIP area where a battle had recently raged. Shattered glass, overturned tables, and scattered pieces of furniture spoke of a real fight that had taken place here. The bodies of defeated guards and a few vanquished fighters lay in disarray, testifying that the confrontation was not just a random conflict, but a carefully calculated skirmish where every second mattered. Nova, still washed in sweat and blood, felt her mind gradually return to a state of clarity. Her every movement, every blow delivered in this fight was reflected in her memory like vivid and painful lessons of the past. In her head flashed recollections of sleepless nights of training, of how she had polished her skills to the point of automation. These images mixed with a feeling of fatigue and at the same time, with the inner determination that always forced her to move forward. She understood. This fight was only a prelude to what awaited her in the future, and the world around her was turning out to be much more dangerous and treacherous than it seemed at first glance. In the silence, when it seemed that time had stopped, Nova heard a faint tone, a vibration of her mobile phone in her jacket pocket. Her gaze turned to the screen, and her heart skipped a beat when she saw a short, encrypted message from an unknown source. The text contained only a few words and an address, but precisely these minimalist details made her heart race. Every letter, every symbol was imbued with a threat and a promise of new trials. It was a reminder that Rocco and his people were merely pawns in a far deeper and more dangerous game. Nova paused for a moment, sinking into deep reflection. She felt how past events, battles, and betrayals came to life again in her memory. Emotions intertwined in her soul, fatigue, anxiety, resolve, and an inescapable sense of responsibility for what was happening around her. Every detail of the fight, every word uttered by the opponent, made her realize she could no longer afford the luxury of retreat. This mysterious missive was like an icy blow to the heart. It warned of an approaching storm, behind which lurked forces capable of destroying everything she held dear. But at the same time, it became a source of inner strength for Nova, reminding her that truth and justice are worth any sacrifice. Clutching the received message in her hand, Nova took a deep breath and slowly lifted her gaze. Her eyes shone with a cold resolve. She understood that her path now led to even more dangerous and intricate webs of intrigue. She rose from her place, stepping over the remnants of the battle, and her footsteps echoed in the empty hall. Within her arose an irresistible desire to figure out what was happening and put an end to the shadows lurking behind the glitter of wealth and power. She could no longer stop. The road to truth was strewn with obstacles, and each of them could be the last trial. Nova quietly said to herself, "This is only the beginning." These words, filled with both sorrow and challenge, became for her a sacred truth she was ready to defend to the end. In her consciousness, a new goal was already forming: to go further, despite the risk, and fight for the truth in a world where every detail matters. The lull after the battle turned into a harbinger of the coming storm, and Nova realized that the next step would be even more dangerous, but also necessary to destroy the insidious schemes behind this tangled conspiracy. At that same minute, when the shadow of night once again fell upon the club, Nova, having gathered all her strength and determination, walked out of the hall, ready to meet the next ordeal. Her journey was just beginning, and every second brought her closer to uncovering the true face of the enemies hiding in the shadows. The American night, filled with the scent of rain and resin, bore witness to her silent vow to never give up until the truth prevailed.